This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And I am Roby Brock. Welcome to the program. Let's waste no time diving into some business and politics. Our roundtable guests this week include KATV's Janelle Lilley. We have two new contributors to Talk Business and Politics, Frank Scott, who is an Arkansas Highway Commissioner and a banker with First Security Bank, and soon to be out of office, State Representative John Burris, who will be with Capital Advisors Group, doing some healthcare consulting.
A little bit of everything.
Making millions of dollars, both of you. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys being new contributors to Talk Business.
Appreciate you.
As well. All right, let's talk about what has been going on at the state capitol for the last couple of weeks, particularly as it relates to Asa Hutchinson, our governor-elect. He has been making some appointments of some new agency directors. So I think we've got a graphic that we can pull up here to take a look at some of the what I call turnovers and holdovers here. We have seen changes at AEDC, the Securities Department, Department of Workforce Services, Education, Higher Education, Surgeon General, Insurance, and State Police, just to name a few. There's been a few others. And in the holdover category, he has kept the Department of Human Services Director, Community Correction, Crime Lab, and the Banking Commissioner. So I'll come to you first, John Burris. What's the best holdover or turnover off that list right there? Who was the best one that either got rid of or kept?
Well, I mean, I'd probably have to say higher education, Shane Broadway, because he kept him and got credit for people that wanted him to do that. And then Shane Broadway just took a new job and moved on anyway. So, you know, no harm, no foul. So Governor-elect Hutchinson looked pretty good.
That's a win-win on there right there. How about you, Janelle?
Well, that actually took me by surprise. I ended up doing Christmas karaoke this past week and had to change my lyrics because of Broadway's move. I was like, no, higher education's Broadway's job, and then had to change it the day before because of that move there. But I think what I've really been surprised in is the spurts in which they've been coming out. It trickled for a little while, then a group at once, and then one at a time. So I'm anxious to see as they continue to roll out what the changes are going to be.
All right, most notable on that list to you, or best one on that list?
Best holder, I have to say, would be John Seelig, especially at a time now with the Medicaid private option. Is going to be very key during the legislative session to keep someone that actually knows what's going on with that in the midst of a new governor who's taken on that. I think that's the best decision. Yeah, I think all three of y'all are wrong. I think that the best hires that Asa Hutchinson has made is Michael Lamoureux as Chief of Staff and Duncan Barrett as his Budget Director. He's going to need those guys. I didn't put them on that list. That's cheating, wasn't it?
Yeah.
See, do you see how I play the game now? Yeah. It's my show. I get to set the rules. You got it?
Well, I agree with you then.
All right, so what do you guys think happens next? How quickly do you think we see some more moves? Do you think we got Christmas and New Year's coming up, and so do we just see another lull for the next 2 weeks? You think there'll still be some stuff that will come through?
I would think that there's still going to be some stuff that's coming through. I mean, he's only got so many days before he takes office in January, and you have to get it done regardless by those times. So I feel like it'll trickle in.
I definitely think after Christmas we got to see a steamroll of a lot of new executive leadership coming on. Got to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everybody that I talk to is probably a little bit nervous about how quiet the governor-elect and his team has been, which I think is just great. You know, you want people, they need to be quiet, alone, working, trying to put together a plan. They've got their plates full, and that's what they're doing. But sure, at a certain point, the session's going to start when the Constitution says it starts, and so they're going to be making their announcements, I would presume, pretty soon.
But yeah, do you think they get everything in place before Inauguration Day, or do you think that?
I don't think they actually have to. One of the good things that we see out of Governor-elect Hutchinson is that he's being very strategic in what he does and when he does it, particularly when you have John Seelig staying there. What that signals to me is that he's trying to be very stable with our budget. And then you also have Ms. Sharp at Department of Community Corrections as well. So he has to be very stable, but to the victor gets the spoil, so you're going to see a lot of different people that's going to have to leave. And you see that now in workforce education with him saying, I'm going to be the jobs governor. Being the jobs governor, you got to understand workforce.
Yeah, well, two of those departments, education and Department of Workforce Services, are certainly critical to that. Let's switch gears, move to our next topic, the Independent Citizens Commission. They met this past week for the very first time to organize. My takeaway from that meeting that they had on Thursday was that they're in no hurry whatsoever to get things done.
That was my takeaway too. The next meeting up in February just seems like they're going to review what's already been done and issue that. It doesn't really seem like it feels like it's going to be a very slow moving process, if anything. And I know that first meeting I was expecting not a lot to get accomplished, of course, with the first meeting, but I did expect maybe a little bit more of a timeline oriented, and I didn't get any of that.
Yeah. What do you think they ought to do with salaries? You're earning that big low pay right now that they give to state representatives and senators up there. What do you think they ought to do with the salaries?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not on the commission. I'm glad I don't have to decide. It's probably one of those things that nobody would be happy. I joked today, if you saw the Democrat Gazette article on Friday, they had a picture of the pro tem of the Senate, Jonathan Dismang, chairing the committee. The look on his face is probably the look that most people are going to have when the commission makes their final determination. Nobody's going to be happy with what they do. I think that picture probably sums up how people feel about it, but it's important. It needs to be done, in my opinion.
You think raises need to be made?
Sure. I mean, they can settle on something. This isn't too complicated. I mean, everybody, I think most folks agree it's too low. It shouldn't be too high. Somewhere around the median income probably is where they should land. The median income for Arkansas, just somewhere in that ballpark. I don't think it's too hard. And they'll do the job, and that's what we'll have.
What about on some of the executive branch offices there where you've got like a state prosecutor making $125,000, the attorney general making below $80,000, makes it very difficult for that, Frank?
Well, I really think they have to move with deliberate haste, number one. Number two, really take some time to look at some comparisons across the nation to see where everyone is to make sure we're in line with those particular type of positions. But above all, we have to understand that these are public service positions and we're not in it to make money, but we also want to make sure that we're getting the right type of talent that we need.
And that's one of the things that is good about the Citizen Commission, right? It's the regular folks who have the opportunity to look at what they want out of it. How much are we paying them? Are we paying them a living wage for the production and that we expect out of them? And I think it'll be interesting to see what they determine.
But can they really, I mean, you've touched on it, John, can they really, they're not, this is splitting the baby. I mean, they're never going to make everybody happy on this. There's going to be people that are going to think that they raised them too much. There's going to be people that say they didn't raise them enough. I mean, it's kind of a no-win situation.
I don't think many people are paying attention if you exclude, Twitter followers and blog readers. I mean, I think
Hey, that's tens of thousands, John. Come on.
It's important, but I hope they don't make a decision based on that. I mean, they need to make a decision that encourages, the right people to run for office, but is responsible. And to your point, ensures that people aren't running for the money, but they're getting compensated at the same time for the job they do. That's the only way you get the talent. Again, I don't think the number is really too hard to arrive at least not for the legislature. It ought to be pretty reasonable. Do
you think that'll get rid of some of the expenses that go along with the office there if they raise the salaries?
I was curious about that as well because I think it probably would. If you raise the salary, you'd limit how much you pay them for the outside expenses, and those two things go hand in hand. Just making it easier, one number to really understand as opposed to the system that we have right now.
I think when you really do that, you'll figure out who's really true about being a public servant.
All right, I'm getting the signal that we have probably under a minute to go here, and I want to talk about Cuba. So you guys stick around. Let's talk a little bit about Cuba online in a Web Extra. Y'all do that?
Sure.
All right, okay.
A farmer understands the needs of every season, and so do Farm Bureau members. When Arkansas families needed electricity, our members brought it. Reliable roads, our members built them. Agricultural education, our members provided. Today's members may not live on a farm, but their connections are as close as ever. So when that difficult season comes, no member has to face it alone. For every season, Arkansas Farm Bureau. Join today.
Welcome back to our political roundtable. This is our Web Extra that you're getting on talkbusiness.net. I'm with Frank Scott, Janelle Lilley, John Burris. We are talking about Cuba, of all things. Just kind of really, to me, came out of nowhere this week when the news broke about midweek that the president was going to loosen up some economic and political relations with Cuba and try to break from that there. What do you think it all means?
Number one, it shouldn't be terribly too much of a surprise. President Obama's talked about this since his very first campaign, number one. Number two, what I really think it is rule number one is follow the money. You have something that's really going to help out this economy. for various numbers of reasons. With
But do you think it's going to have a big impact on the economy, though? I mean, Cuba's not a very big nation. It's not a very rich nation. How big can it be, really?
I think it's going to have for Arkansas, I can only speak for Arkansas, I think it's really going to help Riceland Foods. It's going to help Tyson. It's going to help anybody dealing with rice or poultry. And once you're open up for business, you got to have some business.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of depends on how it progresses through the Senate as well, because you have, in order to open diplomatic relationships, you have to appoint an ambassador, you have to get an embassy down there, and those are things that are controlled by the Senate. It does have to be a change in federal law, and you can't forget the current embargo that's in place that is still law, and what that means, whether or not, I know for a fact that Rubio had alluded to the fact that maybe the fact that the president wants to allow debit cards, American debit cards, to be used in Cuba might be in violation of current federal law. And so it'll be interesting what the legal scholars come up with and whether or not even the broad plans to open it up economically can happen if there's a block in the Senate.
You have worked for a senator-elect now. He had some strong comments on this. Can we take a look at what he said?
Sure.
All right, let's pull up the graphic here. This is actually, first off, this is from Lee Powell with the Delta Grassroots Caucus. He said that the embargo's done absolutely nothing to change Cuba's authoritarian regime, and when a policy has not worked for 50 years, just common sense that it's time for a change. Senator-elect Tom Cotton put out a statement too, saying that the exchange and the broader changes in U.S. policy towards Cuba announced today, speaking of Wednesday, are more troubling examples of President Obama's tendency to seek peace through appeasement. Strong words there. This is a dangerous approach. Little has changed in Cuba over the past 5 decades, yet we've given in to their demands. Did you write that statement for him?
No, I did not. No, I won't speak for him. I think his statement does. You know, personally, I think he's right. I mean, Cuba's complicated, and we should all admit that it is. I don't think anybody would disagree with some of the points made that, obviously, if we have more places to sell rice and other things, you know, we're going to sell more rice. And I don't blame certain folks for advocating for that. But you've also have to look at foreign policy through a broader lens. I mean, you can't do business with Cuba without doing business with the government, because the government controls the markets. In Cuba, you can't even own a car. The government suppresses the wages. If you pay a wage, it goes through the government. The government keeps a broad portion of it. By doing business with Cuba, you're aiding the government that's oppressing the people. A good guy like you would probably be in jail in Cuba because there's no free press. The government constricts it all, and that's the point of the embargo.
I want to push back on that a little bit, because I do want to ask, and what we had senators, even conservative senators like Rand Paul, who came out and said pretty much what Mr. Powell said as well. And there is also something to be said about the example of a nation state like China, for instance, and how an economic relationship in a lot of ways has helped facilitate, at least to some extent, social change in that country as well. Why would that model not also be applicable in Cuba? And if you have, I mean, what's the difference there? Why do you think it works in one country as big as China and not in a country even closer to us with closer relationships like Cuba?
No, I mean, I think it's a good point, and with every country's different. You know, Cuba being so close to our shores, you know, there's lots of reports that you can look back on over the years about their involvement with various aspects of organizations that don't necessarily don't want to support America, and I think
China as well,
no, it can, but there is a difference when a country's 80 miles from your shores at the same time. So I mean, I think every country's different. Again, a foreign policy is a very complicated thing. I think as a country, we'd all be better off if people just admit when they're not experts at certain things, and foreign policy is probably the place to start. I think this was especially complicated. I defer to leaders like Senator Rubio, Cuban American. I mean, he knows what it's like to grow up there under that regime. I think he's been one of the most outspoken people here advocating for keeping the restrictions in place. And I think he's spot on in what he says.
Frank, I want to give you a chance to weigh in.
Again, I just think it's a good first step. This particular situation, I'm looking at it from an economic lens. We need to do business with someone that close to us. It does great for for the Americas, and we need to make sure we continue to open up that door.
It is interesting to have a perspective from Senator Rubio, though, and others who are Cuban Americans. I still
am just disappointed nobody brought up the fact that there could be a shorter line to the cigars in Cuba. Anyway. All right, that's all for our Web Extra. I appreciate you guys sticking around for the rest. John Burris, Janelle Lilley, Frank Scott, John and Frank are going to be on our website on a regular basis. Janelle, you will too, just by the nature of the fact that we're going to be pulling in your reports at talkbusiness.net too. That's where you can go to keep up with daily business and political headlines. Talkbusiness.net. I'm Roby Brock. Thanks for watching.